In this video, I'm going to show you the comparison between a zoom lens 24 to 70 f2.8 and a 3 prime lenses 35-1.4, 50-1.2 and an 85-1.4. And I'm going to talk about difference between using a zoom lens and a prime lenses for wedding photography with tons of one-to-one samples from a wedding shoot. Hello everyone, it's Magic here. So last week Sony announced new 24 to 70 f2.8 G Master Mark II lens, and I had the pleasure of testing out this lens on a style shoot, and I decided to take my prime lenses with me to make a comparison. And disclaimer, I am a prime lens shooter. I do not own any zooms. I have not shot any zooms for longer than just like testing. And lenses I use for my wedding photography are 24-1.4, 35-1.4, 50-1.2, and an 85-1.8. But for this particular shoot, I borrowed 85-1.4, and even though I was shooting a Sony system, basically all you will see in this video is going to translate to any other full frame system. So if you're shooting Canon or Nikon and you have the same lenses with the same f aperture values, the results will be roughly the same for you. So I started the style shoot, with a 24-70 solo. So yeah, as I was testing this lens, I was shooting like for the first hour of the shoot, I was shooting only on this lens, and I immediately noticed that I photograph differently when I use the zoom lens and if I would use my prime lenses. I've used the zoom ring all the time, to find the right crop, to find the frame that I want, and I didn't kind of care what the focal length exactly it is. I was just thinking about the frame and the composition I want. And the set of photos I picked from the shoot, there's like 36 photos. Looking back at the focal lengths of these photos, you can see that's actually really funny that I use like basically every single focal length, and then if I group them, you can see that. So from these 36 photos, the 5 photos were shot with 24mm, then 9 photos with anything between 28 and 40 millimeters. So kind of 35-ish, then 8 photos between 31 millimeters and 55 millimeters, so 50-ish, let's say, then 8 photos between 56 and 69 millimeters, and 6 photos with max zoom of 70 millimeters. So the pie chart of these focal lengths that I use actually looks like almost a perfect pizza. And I have to say, I enjoyed shooting this way. I felt freedom of composing, of not have to move all the time back and forth, and then I did not crop that much in post as well, because I had my kind of final crops that I wanted and the frames that I wanted thanks to the zoom capabilities of this lens. And when looking at these photos, I liked them. I actually liked them a lot until I started taking photos with my prime lenses and then comparing them one-to-one. So that was the second part of my shoot. I grabbed 2 cameras, 2 identical cameras. I was shooting with 2 A9 Mark II cameras, and on one of these cameras I had my zoom lens, so 24 to 70, and on the other I started with a 35mm 1.4. And when looking at these photos, keep in mind, they're all edited with my Magic presets. Link is in the description. You can purchase with editing course. There's a bundle on sale. Thanks so much. And yeah, so they're all edited, and I matched them in terms of exposure and slightly cropped them to, to look more identical, but I did not match the colors. So these all photos will have, the same white balance and tint, so you can see potential shift of colors between the lenses. And starting with that color difference, I'd say they're like almost identical. There's, I'd say, the slight more, magenta tint to a prime lens, but I wouldn't say it's a difference worth considering a problem. Like the difference is almost not visible to an eye, so editing these photos will be easy. The much bigger difference though is in the image loop, and that's due to the aperture difference. Obviously I was shooting wide open with the primes because that's the reason we shoot primes, to use that f1.4 or f1.2 aperture, and that's the difference I want to check in this particular test. So yeah, in this case 1.4 versus 2.8, there's a huge background blur difference, and the overall image looks quite different. So the prime lens photo, it looks more dreamy, I'd say, but still maintaining that sharpness where it's supposed to be sharp. So zooming in, you have sharpness where I focused. But the second effect except the difference in the blur would be the difference of the ISO I had to use to, retain the same images. So I was shooting aperture priority with minimal shutter speed of 1/250 of a second, and then ISO auto. So basically it was keeping the shutter speed at 1/250 and then just, changing ISO depending on the aperture. So the scenario I was shooting it was quite dark. So I have to say it was more of a real life experience, because we don't get to choose venues we shoot in. It's often dark in the interiors we shoot. We cannot use flash all the time, and we often shoot natural light. I love shooting natural light. So with today's cameras, you can easily, use ISOs like 6400 or 8000 or 10,000. But still, there is a difference here. So if you look at the image shot with ISO 1000 on a prime lens, the ISO you have to use on a 2.8 zoom lens is going to be 4000. So if you zoom in, you will see the difference in terms of noise. And now, before showing you photos from the next lenses, so 50mm and 85mm, let me just give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, which is Narrative. Narrative is this brilliant company from New Zealand, founded by my friend James, who I met like back in 2016. He's amazing. He came up with this AI-powered software to help you cull your images, and it's called Narrative Select. So the way it works, you select the folder with your raw files, and then the software, it analyzes the files and detects which are blurred or in which photos people have their eyes closed. And then on top of that, it gives you that amazing zoom view of all the faces in the frame with the eyes and blur ranking, so you can immediately tell which photos are better and which are worse. And this is outstanding tool, especially for, all the group shots at weddings. So you have like tons of these group shots, tons of people in the frame, and it gives you like immediately zoom of the faces and, ranking of like this photo is better than this one because all the people are sharp and then all the people have their eyes open. But then for portraits, I don't know how about you, but with mirrorless technology, I take more photos. I use the burst all the time. I shoot like multiple photos of the same frame, and also this software groups them all, recognizes the scene that like all these same photos, and it tells you which are the best. So yeah, you can easily just pick the best ones without looking at tens of photos. And then if you want to cull even faster, you can just filter out all the photos that software will recognize as blurred images and the eyes closed images. So it makes you just, look at the good images only. And now the best part, the Narrative Select is free software if you use it for up to 6 projects a month. And if you do more, you can certainly afford $150 per year to have unlimited number of projects you can use. Check it out yourself. Use the link in the description to sign up for the free plan, and yeah, let me know what you think about it. And now let's see some photos from 50-1.2. So I mounted 50-1.2 lens on one of the camera, and then I moved my zoom to a 50mm. And starting with the colors again, they're pretty much the same. I think there's still like slight more tint of magenta in the prime lens. But yeah, that's super easy then to match in post if you care about that. And I wouldn't bother. But image-wise, the difference is even bigger now with 50-1.2. So like the whole image looks even more, dreamy. You have more background and foreground blur. So actually looking side by side at these images, you can clearly tell which are shot with the prime lens and how more intimate kind of they look. So for wedding portraits, I think it's a plus. And the sharpness, it's there. Even with that shallow depth of field at 1.2. So let's look at the close-up portrait side by side. 24-70, you can see that more of stuff is in focus, like in that photo, while with 51.2, you can clearly see that stripe, that depth of field stripe. And then again, we do have that visible ISO difference, ISO 1000 versus ISO 4000 type of difference. And these two prime lenses, 35G Master and a 50G Master from Sony, these are new lenses. These are exceptional in terms of sharpness, speed, and basically a performance. So they were performing flawlessly in terms of out of focus. They were super fast, but the 24-70 was on par with them. It was as fast as these prime lenses, and then also very, very sharp in all of the focal lengths I tried. So it's safe to say that all these lenses that I so far compared are like top-notch performers. Now on to the 85G Master. So 85-1.4 from Sony. This one is quite older. It's one of the oldest lenses that Sony has, and you can feel that. It's not performing as fast in terms of out of focus as the 50G Master and 35G Master. So it's definitely a slower than the zoom, and it's also not as sharp as the zoom. Speaking of the color difference though, truly I couldn't tell a difference. I was looking like looking face in the screen. It was very hard for me to tell the difference between the color of these two lenses. So again, that's well done from Sony. Like if you're gonna use the G Master lenses, they're pretty much the same in terms of colors. But what we can see in terms of the image look, we get that extra separation of 85-1.4. So that's due to that larger aperture, again 1.4 versus 2.8. And then also, like, we are shooting 85mm and the zoom, it ends at 70mm. So there's a difference of a frame. I decided to frame them from the same spot so we can see what is the extra reach of 85mm versus 70mm. So you can see that the image is slightly closer and much more dreamier in terms of look. Again, we do have that ISO difference. So here 2500 ISO versus 8000 ISO, that's like more hardcore. So that's a visible difference in terms of the noise performance, but it will depend on the camera you own. So what can I say after reviewing these images? So first of all, the stuff that is specific to Sony is the size of these lenses, the performance of these lenses, and the sharpness of these lenses. So this is specific to these exact lenses. So 35 G Master, 50 G Master, 85 G Master, and a 24-70 Mark II. That will not translate to any other lenses and any other system. But what will translate is the image look, the difference in the ISO. The noise performance will depend on your camera, of course, but you will still have to use a different ISO using the fast prime and like 2.8 zoom. And then of course the convenience of shooting, that will also translate to like all the other system and all the other lenses that have the same parameters. So starting with the image look, it's very noticeable. Like if you are after that dreamy look, if you are after shooting wide open, you like shooting wide open as I do, you are definitely a prime lens shooter. So for me, a 2.8 aperture for portraits is a no-go. But convenience of shooting that 24-70mm lens, and specifically with this lens that was really small, way smaller than a 50 G Master and an 85 G Master, that was really a good experience for me. I felt free in terms of my creativity. I could quickly change my framing back and forth way quicker than I would do with my prime lenses, but that was coming with that 2.8 aperture limitation. And then on top of that, on the other hand, that noise difference because of using higher ISO values. So my verdict is, if you are after that dreamy look at all times, during your getting ready stuff, during your ceremony stuff, during your portraits, and then, you know, like throughout the whole wedding day, you need to get yourself prime lenses. And if I would need to choose like two prime lenses, I would probably go with 35 and 85 or 24 and 50 or 35 and 50. So just depending on how you like shooting, I would go with two prime lenses, one that would be wide, one that would be tight. And I have really great video about comparing and choosing the right prime lens for you. Check it out up here. But if you do like using a step down aperture like 2.8 for your documentary stuff to have more of the stuff in focus, and you don't mind using higher f aperture values, I'd say get a 24-70, but then complement this with one prime lens so you have a nice dreamy look for your portraits or for a certain parts of the day. And if I would be to choose one prime lens to complement a zoom, I would probably pick a 50mm, and if you can afford 51.2 would give you like totally dreamy look. So 24-70 paired with 51.2 would be an amazing combo for wedding photography. And that's my take. Let me know down in the comments. Are you a zoom shooter? Are you a prime shooter? I wanted to hear your thoughts about this topic. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next video.